What's going on, Falcon fan? This is your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. And today we're going to talk about the initial 53-man roster that's been put out by these Atlanta Falcons today by 4 o'clock. Of course, we know this is just the initial. We suspect that there are going to be some transactions done, taking some guys off of waiver wire. There's a lot of interesting guys that's out there that the Atlanta Falcons should definitely take a look at. Don't know what interest they have in some of those guys, but it is some surprise releases from other teams that the Atlanta Falcons definitely could consider if they think their depth is not where they want it at. Were there any surprises to this 53-man initial roster? I would say a couple. Myself, I was off by 4 guys, so that's pretty good for a 53-man roster. Basically what I seen in practice, what I've been hearing from all the reports coming out of camp. And we knew that this was going to be a tough roster to make. So guys, with that being said, if you have not already, go ahead and please subscribe to this channel. Please hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. Please hit the like button so I know you guys are here to talk about. Then please share my video throughout the YouTube universe so more people can come in and hear me talk about, these Atlanta Falcons. So get right into it. The Atlanta Falcons did decide to keep 3 quarterbacks. We knew that the rule change was going to be a big deal for a lot of teams today. But according to a lot of reports, it wasn't that many teams that decided to keep a 3rd quarterback on the roster. Now, if you know about this rule, that 3rd quarterback has to be on the 53-man roster to be utilized, which means both of your quarterbacks would have to go down, and that's when the 3rd guy would come in. But he cannot be on the practice squad. He would have to be a part of the 53-man roster. But I think this was more about what Logan Woodside was able to do, in this camp and what he was able to show during the preseason. I think he earned the spot on this roster, and the Atlanta Falcons just could not deny him because of the work he put in. So I think Logan Woodside really made it difficult for Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith to cut him, and that's why he actually got put on this 53-man roster. He earned it. He really did earn this spot. So with that being said, the Atlanta Falcons decide to keep 3 quarterbacks. That's what I anticipated. If you guys go back to my projections earlier last week, that's pretty much what I determined, that they was probably going to keep 3 quarterbacks. Now I go to the running back room. Actually, I was off by 1. They decided not to keep Godwin Iwebuike. He was waived. That means he can actually get picked up by another team, or he could potentially come back on the practice squad. But the Atlanta Falcons only decided to keep the 3 running backs along with Keith Smith. So of course we know Cordell Patterson, Tyler Algier, and Bijan Robinson will be going along with Keith Smith. So that's 4 guys that's going to be carrying the rock for us this year. And that backfield, they decided to go with the 3 guys. I think we're just finding that, depending on how Cordell Patterson is going with the soft tissue injury that he had. But I think he's probably going to be ready to go for week 1. We'll just definitely be looking out for reports on his injury. Now if you're looking at other positions, they decided to keep 5 wide receivers. I don't think we were surprised about that, because so many different pass catchers at other positions. So the 5 wide receivers, well, we did not know who the 5th wide receiver was going to be, and it ended up being Josh Ali, guy that they actually signed to a futures contract, was on the practice squad last year, got elevated to the team, and he was able to stick with the team. Could be because he just had more familiarity with the with the scheme because he was here last year. I actually had Zay making the team, Xavier Malone, but he could definitely be a guy that they could definitely see come back on the practice squad. But Josh Ali got that 5th nod along with, of course, Cardell Hodge, Scotty Miller, Mac Hollins, Drake London. So that's our 5th wide receivers. Only 5 guys on that roster. But I think we have more than enough pass catchers, and definitely the way the practice squad works now, if you bring a guy on the 16-man practice squad, they can have the elevation rules. You can actually elevate a guy to the 53-man roster or a game day roster going into if we have some sort of injury to one of those five guys, before we go into game day. Tight end. No surprises here for me. I think for a lot there was a surprise because the Atlanta Falcons decided to go with John Fitzpatrick rather than Parker Hesse, and I think they kind of felt the same way I felt. I felt like John Fitzpatrick is a big receiver, physical guy who actually all he did at the University of Georgia was block. He did not have a lot of reception at the University of Georgia. He was a blocking tight end, but I think his ability to show his able to catch balls, big target in the red zone, really helped him. Why I believe that the Atlanta Falcons decided to go with with John Fitzpatrick instead of going with Parker Hesse. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Parker Hesse decided to make it back on the practice squad, but I thought this was the right decision because all the upside John Fitzpatrick have. Like I said, his ability to catch the ball was something that was not shown a lot in college, but he did show it throughout training camp, and he showed it very well during the preseason as well. So going in with John Fitzpatrick to go along with Michael Pruitt, Jonnu Smith, and Kyle Pitt, of course, it's those four tight ends. And I anticipate Parker Hesse to be back unless, of course, he get picked up off the waiver wires. And we would know that probably by sometime within the next 2 days, if that's the case. Going to the offensive line, I think this may be the first surprise. The Atlanta Falcons start to go with the 7th round pick, Javon Gwyn, instead of a guy like Tyler Rabel. We knew Jalen Mayfield was out, but I kind of figured that Tyler Rabel was going to get that. But they only need one swing tackle, and they went with Joshua Miles, of course, with that. I think all the other guys was solid for depth. Guys like Ryan Nuzul and Kyle Hinton, I think they proved enough to be, the depth pieces for our offensive line. Now, I would not be surprised if the Atlanta Falcons go out and get another veteran to come be our swing tackle from that offensive line position. There's a lot of guys that was out there released, surprise guys. Don't have the names right now because, like I said, I don't know the level of interest that the Falcons may have in some of these guys, but there are offensive linemen that was released. It's some guys that Atlanta Falcons could be familiar with that we had already had on the roster in previous seasons that was released as well. So Atlanta Falcons definitely have options if they want to go off the waiver wire and pick some guys off. Right now, the Atlanta Falcons sit 8 on the waiver wire, so they should be able to pull some guys off if they so choose to at the offensive line position. But they decided to go with 9 offensive linemen. Of course, we have our starters, which is going to be Drew Dalman, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, Jake Matthews, and Matthew Bergeron. And then the backup's going to be Joshua Miles, Javon Gwyn, Kyle Hinton, and Ryan Nuzul. Those are our backups. Of course, now we have Matt Hennessy and Green Ridge on the IR, so that's kind of 11 offensive linemen you got. If we think Hennessy is going to be on there all season, not sure about Greenwich, so that's our other 2 offensive linemen, but the Atlanta Falcons decided to keep 9 offensive linemen. If you keep that many offensive linemen, of course, you're going to lose other spots. That could be the reason why a guy like Godwin Iwebuike didn't make the squad, because the Atlanta Falcons decided to go with the 9 linemen. So, guys, there's our offense. No surprises too much. I think the biggest surprise for me was just Javon Gwyn. Didn't hear his name a lot. Of course, a guy that the Atlanta Falcons drafted in the 7th round, but I guess he showed enough potential, the ceiling there, that they wanted to decide to keep him, his work ethic, put him in as one of the extra offensive linemen. Another guy that they did not decide to keep, that they decided to wait with Ryan, was Schaefer, a guy that was here last season, got cut last season, was brought back on the practice squad. Anticipate maybe the same this year, bringing him back on this Atlanta Falcons practice squad because he's familiar with the scheme, and you could never have enough linemen. So let's go to our defense on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, the Atlanta Falcons kept the 4 outside linebackers: Arm Katie, D'Angelo Malone, Lorenzo Carter, and Bud Dupree. All right, we know that they was going to keep those guys. Those surprises there. Our inside linebackers, Again, no surprises here. Troy Anderson, Caden Ellis, Nate Landman, and Tay Davis. Tay Davis was the guy that I had penciled in. And this was just going about the depth chart that they had, going into these mini camps. Most of these guys was going with the twos most of the time. So Tay Davis is a guy that was able to, win out over some of the other linebackers that they decided to waive. Now, this is another position that the Atlanta Falcons definitely could consider going into the waiver wire. Some interesting names really popped up on the list for us, the waiver wire. Like I said, I don't have the names right now. Maybe I'll do another video to kind of go over some of those guys that the Atlanta Falcons potentially go have look at in waiver. But right now, not on hand for me to tell you those guys' names. However, there are some guys out there that they could be interested in if they wanted to get a veteran guy to bring into that inside linebacker room. Now, these guys would definitely be understanding that they're coming in playing a backup role. They will not be coming in, as starters or things like that, but they could be add to the depth with experience that I think that Atlanta Falcons maybe be lacking a little bit at that inside linebacker position. If you go to our defensive backs, they decided to keep six defensive backs, cornerbacks that is, and which means to tell me that I think the concerns for guys like Jeff Okudah and Mike Hughes is not that serious because they only decided to keep 6 of those guys. Of course, those guys are AJ Terrell, Clark Phillip III, Trey Flowers, Mike Hughes, Jeff Okudah, and Dee Alford. Those are our 6 defense cornerbacks that they decided to keep. Of course, guys like Dee Alford is going to be playing that inside slot position. What a story about him, right? Guy that's coming from undrafted, trying to make the team last year, now going to be the starting nickel corner for the Atlanta Falcons and probably end up being our punt returner as well. So kudos to Dee Alford, guy coming in, putting in the work, showing that he belongs, and being a key cog into this Atlanta Falcon defense this year, which is really impressive. Going into our safeties, not really surprised there as well. I did have DeMarco Hellams making the team, so definitely not a surprise. Of course, Michael Abernathy had an opportunity to be that guy as well, but DeMarco Hellams, his play during preseason pretty much kind of sealed his deal for him. Always around the ball every game, led the teams in tackles, I think 2 out of the 3 games. So DeMarco Hellams really played himself, I think, just like a guy like Logan Woodside, earned his spot on this roster. And, I think what DeMarco Hellams showed, the things that they seen at Alabama is what he showed when he got opportunities to play with these Atlanta Falcons. He was always around the ball, in the right spots, mostly on all the plays, and he made big plays when he had to. So DeMarco Hellams earned it. Like I said, I don't think it's a surprise, and they decided to keep those 4 safeties. Jalen Hawkins there as well, along with Jesse Bates III and Richard Grant. Now the big guys, the Atlanta Falcons decided to keep 7 big guys, and I think this is where another surprise come along. Part of the guy like Parker Hesse. I think the other surprise was Timothy Horn being waived. I thought a lot of people thought that he was definitely a lock there, but the Atlanta Falcons decided to go with Albert Huggins instead, which interesting, does have some familiarity with Ryan Nielsen. He understands this, so that could be that that familiarity there with Ryan Nielsen. Started to go with Albert Huggins instead of Timothy Horn. However, I do think Timothy Horn does have opportunity to come back on the practice squad, but of course the other guys is no surprise. Calais Campbell, David Amanyata, Grady Jarrett. Now Joe Gaziano, a guy they brought in early out of coming from the Chargers, where a lot of people had really high regard for him as a depth piece, and I think the Atlanta Falcons saw that in the same breath, so that's why they decided to keep Joe Gaziano. And of course, Taquan Graham ended up that spot, and our rookie Zach Harrison, definitely a guy that definitely has a lot of upsides. Especially being groomed by a guy like Calais Campbell. So you're gonna love a guy like Zach Harrison being here to take up that, you know, that tutorship under a guy like Calais Campbell. But they decided to keep 7 defensive linemen. This is where it's going to be really interesting, because all those guys, if you look at the prototype of what the Atlanta Falcons have had here in a couple recent years and what they have now, they got a lot of big guys. The main thing is to come in and start the run, be able to get out to that quarterback, create the pressure up the middle, so our ends, all those outside linebackers we got, can actually get to the quarterback and start to increase our sack numbers and create turnovers, hopefully on the back end, with the pressure and the coverage working in unison. So that's really, really good about this defensive line. But guys, there you have it, our defense. The Atlanta Falcons really, really locked in on what their mission was, what their goal was this offseason, is to go in and get better across the board. They made a lot of investments on the defensive side. And if you look at this 53-man roster, it wasn't a whole lot of surprises, because you look at the money they spent. In previous years, they did not have a lot of money. Guys, on one-year deals, undrafted guys. This year, you look at it, a lot of proven guys, a lot of veteran guys like Mike Hughes, Trey Flowers, right? Guys like Calais Campbell, David Armayata, even a guy like Gaziano, guy that they brought in, does have experience. So it was going to be really hard to make this roster. And, now instead of trying to use younger guys on your defense, to play, you got a lot of experience mixed in with the younger guys. And now you can do some of the things you want to do, and you can start create that continuity. That's what we really want to see from defense. Now on the offensive side, they're still really young across the board, especially with our 3 first-round picks that we got. But all those guys are studs. They're ready to go. Definitely can't wait to see what Bijan going to be able to do. But I believe that the investment that Atlanta Falcons made on the defensive side this year is definitely shows you that, the roster construction was thought out real well, what they was trying to do. Now, it doesn't mean that they're done. Like I said, this is the initial 53-man roster. I do expect them to make some changes. It'd be interesting if they decide to get some of those guys that definitely was released today. A guy like Bradley Roby, coming from the New Orleans Saints, right? Experience, slot corner. Do the Atlanta Falcons want to go and get a guy like him to bring him in? We know the ties with Ron Nielsen. That's why a couple of the guys is here now from that team. So maybe that's what route they want to go. Another good linebacker that was actually cut from the Houston Texans that really could be a perfect fit for the Atlanta Falcons. Another defensive end / outside linebacker that the Chicago Bears released, that's have some ties with one of our front office guys, and Ryan Pace. So those are some guys you might want to think about. Like I said, offensive line is another position that the Atlanta Falcons definitely can consider. So even though these guys was told that they was on the 53-man roster, this roster is fluid, and definitely you can see some changes coming here in the next couple of days. Don't want to leave out our specialists before we go. Of course, I don't think we had any surprises at all. We knew that these 3 guys were going to go unless they, sustain an injury or something like that. And that's Younghoe Koo, Liam McCullough, and Bradley Pinion. So those are our 3 specialists, rounding up that 53-man roster. But don't be surprised. And I think I'm going to just keep saying it. I definitely probably going to be coming out here with another move. Especially we're going to talk about their practice squad once they solidify that and finalize that, and who they decide to bring back, or some new guys that they decide to bring on this 16-man practice squad. That will be interesting. But overall, guys, I think everybody on this 53-man roster earned their spot. Definitely something that Arthur Smith preached all season, all training camp, that it was going to be a competitive time. Some guys didn't get an opportunity because of injury. Guys like Penny Hart, of course, Cardinal Armstrong, another guy that both of those guys are put on the injury reserve. So they did not get waived. They was put on the injury reserve. They did release guys. When you release guys, they can sign with any team. So those guys could be brought back to the practice squad right away. It's going to be interesting to see if any of those guys they release. I can tell you who those guys were that was released. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, a guy that I kind of thought that maybe had a chance to make the team. Breon Borders, a guy that really played well in the first 2 preseason games, not so much in the last preseason game, but why Breon Borders could be released because he is going to be suspended for the first 2 games, so it's definitely something that you might want to look at and see if they decide to bring him back. O-lineman Jonathan Harrison, Andre Smith Jr. is another guy, and Kikimo Toure is another guy that they just released. So all those guys have carte blanche since they was released, can sign with anybody right away. Now the other 26 guys that they waived have to go through waiver wires first, but they definitely have an opportunity to bring them back. Some guys right off bat that I can see coming back if they do pass waiver wires: Michael Abernathy, Natron Brooks, Parker Hesse, of course. Carlos Washington is another guy that I definitely think they probably going to bring back. Xavier Malone, Mike Jones, Godwin Iwebuike, Timothy Horn. So those are some guys that definitely you could see coming back to this roster. But there you have it, guys. Really want to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this initial 53-man roster. What surprises did you see from the roster? Did Parker Hesse, do you think he deserved to have this spot over John Fitzpatrick? I keep saying Ryan Fitzpatrick. Over John Fitzpatrick. And do you think that a guy like Timothy Horn should have been on this roster over a guy like Albert Huggins? So, guys, that's all I have today. Let me know your initial thoughts on the 53-man roster. And remember, it's not set in stone. Probably until going into next week, when we start to prepare for the Carolina Panthers. This is your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. Peace.